Actually, I had to do some of my exams left-handed, which some of the professors, maybe oral would have been better.
Come on, man, this would be more.
Are you sure? Yeah, as far as it.
85 degrees. Yeah, thank you.
We did last year. We had to leave after we were covered in sleep. Started getting ready.
Hello.
Hello.
I think somebody had a party in here. The trash can's full.
Yeah, that's not Rebecca. You are.
Yeah, I am Rebecca.
Sorry, you said that.
Yes, I thought you said it. Good to see you again.
Yes, I know.
How are you doing?
We're good.
That's good. I'm glad nothing drastic has changed. That's a good sign.
Still smiling. So.
Me too, me too. Nothing crazy on the side either.
Okay, good.
It's Tuesday.
Oh.
Well, we don't have class anyways. Yes, surgery.
Yes, so it works.
Yeah, how are you?
To get her.
Good.
They have to interview in the office.
I drove down to Round Top with
So we learn.
That's so fun. I love you.
So these are.
It was wild. I don't know if you've ever been down
They're
to Round Top.
little
It's
like
like,
high school.
it's like very different.
So tonight,
And they have
we're covering some
thousands
hard
upon
topics like.
just like all over.
It's
I mean,
Meaning
it's just
Day,
like hours
and
and hours. Yeah.
It's the
and we
meaning of
probably spent
Memorial Day and what's
Thursday
the
shopping,
meaning
and
of.
then probably spent 10 hours.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock.
We're gonna go at- Yeah, so
We got to
it.
work all that up. Yeah, they
I
have.
know. Yeah, that's too hard. You know, it was our International Cemetery created. These are hard. Who are the joint chiefs of staff? Who is currently serving on the committee? What is the committee's purpose? What is the posse?
Okay.
Say the posse something act. Why is it important? What's the purpose of the change?
Okay, book 10. Before we get into book 10, does anybody have any questions, comments, observations about book 9? Just one thing that that you see in Western art all the time is how Adam and Eve are depicted. And Milton kind of carries that into his description of Eve. He describes her as having blonde hair, very long blonde hair. Is that accurate? Probably not. It's the Middle East, so. But, okay, so yeah, the depiction is very Western. The viewpoint of the look of the angels is very Western in the descriptions of how they look. But then we get through the fall, and of course we saw how they were kind of bickering with each other. And at the end of book 9, it says they bickered into the night nonstop, and neither one accepted responsibility, which is how bickering couples sometimes are. But so we get into book 10, and this is the next morning, more or less. Meanwhile, the heinous and despiteful act of Satan done in paradise, and how he in the serpent had perverted Eve, her husband, she, to taste the fatal fruit, was known in heaven. For what can escape the eye of God all-seeing, or deceive his heart omniscient? Who in all things wise and just hindered not Satan to attempt the mind of man, with strength entire and free will armed, complete to have discovered and repulsed whatever wiles of foe or seeming friend. For still they knew, and ought to have still remembered, the high injunction not to taste that fruit, whoever tempted, which they not obeying incurred, what could they less, the penalty, and in manifold in sin deserve to fall. Oof. So, word of the indiscretion of Adam and Eve has immediately been recognized in heaven. Milton basically says the heinous and spiteful act of Satan done in paradise, how the serpent perverted Eve, Eve perverted Adam, and things just fell apart. And nothing can be hidden from God because he's all-seeing, all-knowing, all-present. So there it is. And man still had the capacity to not sin because he had a free will to obey or disobey. And he says that whoever tempted them, it doesn't matter who tempted them, they should have been able to resist, whether it was Satan in his full unglory, or as a serpent, or if he was a puppy. It doesn't matter. They should have been able to reject the premise of eating the fruit. And because of that, manifold in sin, they deserve to fall. Lines 17 to 33, the angelic guards rushed back to heaven, silent and sad for man. They wondered how Satan got past them. They head to God's throne, and God speaks to them through the thunder. So there's God's righteous anger, there's thunder filling heaven. God says, assembled angels, and ye powers returned from unsuccessful charge. Be not dismayed, nor troubled at these tidings from the earth, which your sincerest care could not prevent. Foretold so lately what would come to pass, when first this tempter crossed the gulf from hell. I told ye then he should prevail, and speed on his bad errand. Man should be seduced and flattered out of all, believing lies against his Maker. No decree of mine concurring to necessitate his fall, or touch with lightest moment of impulse his free will, to her own inclining left in even scale. But fallen he is, and now what rests, but that the mortal sentence pass on his transgression? Death denounced that day. So God is basically telling the angels, don't be dismayed. Don't be afraid of wrath. Don't be bothered by this. There's nothing you could have done to prevent this. He said it's been foretold recently what was going to happen, because even previously in the book, he said, man's going to fall. I mean, he knew that from, I think it was book 4, maybe 3. But he said that man would be seduced by flattery, believing lies. No law of his cooperated to cause man's fall. So basically God's saying it's not on me that God fell. Okay, he was created perfect with free will, and he chose to divert from that will. They fell, and what's left to pass sentence. In 50 to 62, God says that Adam feared an immediate sentence, but he will find a delay in his sentence, not acquittal, by the end of the day. He tells the Son that he is to judge them. 63 to 67. So spoke the Father. He turns to the Son, looking for an answer, and the Son responds. Father eternal, thine is to decree, mine, both in heaven and earth, to do thy will supreme, that thou in me, thy Son beloved, mayest ever rest well pleased. I go to judge on earth these thy transgressors, but thou knowest, whoever judged, the worst on me must light when time shall be. For so I undertook before thee, and not repenting, this obtain of right, that I may mitigate their doom on me derived. Yet I shall temper so justice with mercy, as may illustrate most them fully satisfied, and thee appease. Attendance none shall need, nor train, where none are to behold the judgment, but the judged, those two. The third, best absent, is condemned, convict by flight, and rebel to all law. Conviction to the serpent none belongs. So this is interesting. He says, my job both in heaven and earth is to do your will. And he basically saying, may you always be pleased with me, your beloved Son. He says, I'll go to earth to judge your transgressors. But you know that whoever is judged, what is he presenting right here? Sorry?
Well, eventually the cross.
Basically, he's saying, yeah, the punishment falls on me. He said, that was what I promised to you, and I'm not backing out. He says, I have the right to mitigate their doom that is put on me, yet I will temper justice with mercy in order to illustrate that they are fully covered and have appeased you. No one needs to attend or to be trained, since none are to behold the judgment, but the judged alone. So nobody else needs to come to this. We don't need a jury. We just have the judge. The third party absent is condemned already. It's Satan. He's already been condemned. And what's interesting is the last sentence. Conviction to the serpent, none belongs. So what does that mean?
Christ is gonna do it at the cross.
Sorry?
Christ is gonna do it at the cross. 3:15 says.
Right, but what he's saying here is, okay, we're gonna pronounce judgment on Adam and Eve. Judgment's already been pronounced on Satan. Yeah. Exactly. Because Satan entered the serpent, and the serpent didn't do this by choice. The serpent didn't have free will. So he's saying, we don't need to punish the serpent.
That's very peculiar, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out why Milton felt the need to eat the serpent.
Well, and that's,
Is the serpent representing nature as a whole? Is that what he's saying?
well, nature was impacted by the fall.
Satan used nature, the serpent, to do it. Yeah.
So, were you going to say something?
Well, wasn't the serpent punished?
Yes. You will crawl on your belly and eat dirt. So,
Milton's doing a backband to let him off the hook.
yeah.
So, try to figure that out. Yeah, is he really into snakes or something?
I don't know. Were there snake handlers in 17th century England? I don't know. I just thought that was interesting that he makes a point of saying the snake should be let off, and yet in scripture, it's not.
I think that he's just saying that this is something between man and God and the Trinity. It has nothing to do with animals or sub-creation, so to speak. This is just something that we're focusing on in terms of humanity. I don't think that it has anything to do with, he's trying to say, okay, let's not throw
So,
anything else in here. We're dealing with something between humanity and God.
So what he's saying is, I'm going to earth to pronounce judgment on Adam and Eve
Yes.
and nothing else.
Right. That's what I get out of it. I don't know, could be.
Yes.
So I know.
I wonder if it's maybe, so I read, I had like a little note in my book about this little section. And it says that what Milton might be saying is that the convict by flight and rebel to all law, but conviction to the serpent and belongs. He's saying that Satan will be convicted, but the serpent won't be.
That's what I get.
Or maybe the serpent, convict by flight means Satan knows he's done wrong. And so he flees, and the act of fleeing is basically an indication that he's done something wrong.
Well, he knows he did something wrong.
Right. But
Bless
like the serpent, to contrast with Satan, I guess the serpent doesn't know he did anything wrong.
Yeah. So I maybe the comparison would be between the third best absent is condemned. He's already condemned. Convict by flight and rebel to all law. Conviction to the serpent, not so the serpent isn't being condemned, but there is punishment. Again, this is right. Yeah, I mean, the question is, the serpent, did it have legs before? So maybe now it's just got to slither along. I don't know. That's something that I can't really answer yet. I think we beat that snake to death. 85 to 102, the sun departs and arrives on earth in the cool of the evening. Best time. Where art thou, Adam? Want with joy to meet my coming seen far off? I miss thee here, not pleased, thus entertained with solitude, where obvious duty erewhile appeared unsought. Or come I less conspicuous? Or what change absents thee? Or what chance detains? Come forth. He knows full well what's going on. But he said, where are you, Adam? It's been your custom to greet me with joy when I would still be far away. I miss you here, and I'm unhappy, having to entertain myself. Yet on previous visits, you appeared without being sought. Or did I arrive less conspicuously this time? Did I sneak up on you? What changed that keeps you away or detains you? Come here. He came, and with him Eve, more loath, though first to offend, discountenanced both and discomposed. Love was not in their looks, either to God or to each other, but apparent guilt and shame and perturbation and despair, anger and obstinacy and hate and guile, whence Adam, faltering long, thus answered brief. So Adam came in, and with him Eve, more reluctantly, even though she was the first to sin. They looked depressed and agitated. Their looks did not convey love. I mean, you can see all the things that they showed or displayed. And I like whence Adam, faltering long, thus answered brief. So he hesitated a while before he said anything, and then what he said was short. I heard thee in the garden, and of thy voice afraid, being naked, hid myself. To whom the gracious judge without revile replied, I heard you in the garden, was afraid of your voice, and since I was naked, I hid from you. I mean, this is all familiar. The gracious judge without revile replied, my voice thou oft hast heard, and hast not feared, but still rejoiced. How is it now become so dreadful to thee, that thou art naked? Who hath told thee? Hast thou eaten of the tree, whereof I gave thee charge thou shouldst not eat? To whom thus Adam, sore beset, replied. So, you have heard my voice often, and was never afraid, but you rejoiced. Why are you so afraid now? And who told you you were naked? thought they knew all along that they were naked, but I mean, it's, I guess, just the point of pointing it out that that's why he was hiding. I mean, that shows that he's feeling shame. Have you eaten from the tree that I told you not to eat? And Adam sorrowfully replies, Oh heaven, in evil strait this day I stand before my judge, either to undergo myself the total crime, or to accuse my other self, the partner of my life, whose failing, while her faith to me remains, I should conceal and not expose to blame by my complaint. Too late, you just did. But strict necessity subdues me and calamitous constraint, lest on my head both sin and punishment, however insupportable, be all devolved. Yeah. Though should I hold my peace, yet thou wouldst easily detect what I conceal. This woman, whom thou madest to be my help, and gavest me as thy perfect gift, so good, so fit, so acceptable, so divine, that from her hand I could suspect no ill, and what she did, whatever in itself her doing seemed to justify the deed. She gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Yikes. To whom the sovereign presence thus replied. Okay, so he basically, I could see him falling on his face in the dirt before the sun and saying, this day I stand or fall before my judge, either to undergo myself. So either I'm going to take all of the punishment on myself or to accuse her. He's already shifting blame, or to accuse my other self, the partner of my life, who's failing while her faith to me remains, while she's still faithful to me, I should conceal and not expose to blame by my complaint. Well, you are already revealing. I mean, he knows anyway. It's just his attitude. Though should I hold my peace, yet thou wouldst easily detect what I conceal. So even if I didn't say anything, you'd know. This woman who thou madest to be my help. So I could see the look on his face would be kind of like, this woman, and gavest me as thy perfect gift. So now it's God's fault. So fit, so acceptable, so divine, that I couldn't suspect her of doing anything evil. And what she did, whatever in itself, her doing seemed to just, so she seemed to like make it seem like it wasn't such a bad thing. She gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Yeah, I love this response. Was she thy God, that her thou didst obey before his voice? Or was she made thy guide, superior, or but equal, that to her thou didst resign thy manhood, and the place wherein God set thee above her, made of thee, and for thee whose perfection far excelled hers in all real dignity? Adorned she was indeed, and lovely to attract thy love, not thy subjection. And her gifts were such as under government well seemed, unseemly to bear rule, which was thy part and person, hadst thou known thyself aright. I think the first little parenthetical there, was she thy God? Ouch. Or was she made your guide, superior, not equal to? God is basically saying, who is she to you? What is she supposed to be? You don't know yourself. You can see a little bit of Milton's attitude toward women in here as well. Adorned she was indeed and lovely to attract thy love, not thy subject, and her gifts were such as under government well seemed, unseemly to bear rule. Basically saying she's not fit to rule. Which was thy part and person, hadst thou known thyself aright. If you had known yourself, and your role, you would have known what to do.
Well, he gives the Jeff too, where he says that it's designed by man.
I was just.
Yeah, you've resigned your manhood. That's,
I mean, that.
some things don't change. Yeah. So in 157 and 158, he basically turns to Eve and says, Eve, what have you done? To whom sad Eve, with shame nigh overwhelmed, confessing soon, yet not before her judge bold or loquacious, thus abashed, replied, the serpent me beguiled, and I did eat. She kept her answer brief. She still passed the blame off to the serpent, but she was overwhelmed with shame, and she wasn't bold. She didn't talk a lot. She was embarrassed, and she just matter-of-factly said, the serpent tricked me, and I ate the fruit.
It's amazing that Milton was that brief.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, you expect that he would just give a full page to Eve saying, I was just hanging out, and it's like, it's kind of surprising, actually, to Milton let Eve off the hook,
Yeah, you would think that there would be more poetic stuff he could throw in there.
or just to make her look bad,
Yeah.
Seems like he's kind of diminishing her throughout.
I think the point is, what else could she say?
Sure.
I mean, she knows she's guilty. I mean, it's like everybody in the room knows she's guilty.
We know that, but the way Milton even characterizes her with Adam's words, I thought he would double up and make her look worse with her own words, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of passing the blame again, with a long verbal. Kind of glad he didn't.
It's surprising.
It is surprising. Milton himself is very loquacious. So 163 to 174, God pronounced judgment on the serpent, Satan. 175 to 181, because thou hast done this, thou art accursed above all cattle, each beast of the field. So the serpent is cursed, will spend his life crawling on his belly and eating dust. So much for not having any punishment. But okay. There will be hatred between the woman and the serpent, and between their offspring, and one of her offspring will bruise the head of the serpent, and the serpent will bruise his heel. Genesis 3:15. Is he really talking about the serpent being cursed here? No. Because, yeah, the serpent is Satan in this context. Okay, so 182 to 192. So spoke the Son, which was verified when Jesus rises from the grave triumphant. He then addresses Eve and gives her the punishment. 193 to 196, thy sorrow I will greatly multiply by thy conception. She has no frame of reference at this point. She has no clue about childbirth or anything like that. Children thou shalt bring in sorrow forth, and to thy husband's will thine shall submit. He over thee shall rule. That's her punishment.
That's it. I was surprised that he worded it that way. Because in the scriptures, it says like your desire will be to rule over him and he will rule over you.
Mhm.
But Adam's been ruling over her this entire time, hasn't he?
Has he?
I guess not. But he gets in trouble for not doing that.
Right.
So it seems weird that he doesn't go more into her desires being changed or like changing because of this knowledge. I don't know.
Well, that's so just by not talking about what she desires, just by saying this is going to happen.
Yeah, when it seems like that's already been.
Yeah, that's a good point. On Adam last thus judgment he pronounced. So he passes a sentence on Adam, 197 to 208, saying that because he ate the forbidden fruit, the ground will be cursed, and in sadness he will eat of it for the rest of his life until he returns to the ground. (209 to 228), he finishes with Adam, and the promised stroke of death is put off. The Son pitied them, washed their feet, and sacrificed an animal to clothe them. The Son finishes and returns to the Father. It's interesting how he puts in the washing of feet at this point, which is very interesting. Because, I mean, we didn't see that until the Last Supper. Meanwhile, ere thus was sinned and judged on earth, within the gates of hell sat sin and death, in counter view within the gates that now stood open wide, belching outrageous flame far into chaos, since the fiend passed through, sin opening, who thus now to death began. So while sin and judgment were passed on earth, within the gates of hell sat sin and death, looking out into the void. The gates belch flames, and sin speaks. O Son, why sit we here, each other viewing idly, while Satan, our great author, thrives in other worlds and happier seat provides? For us, his offspring dear, it cannot be but that success attends him. If mishap, ere this he had returned, with fury driven by his avengers. Since no place like this can fit his punishment or their revenge. Methinks I feel new strength within me rise, wings growing and dominion given me large beyond this deep. Whatever draws me on, or sympathy, or some connatural force, powerful at greatest distance to unite, with secret amity, things of like kind, by secretest conveyance. Thou, my shade inseparable, must with me along, for death from sin can no power, for death from sin no power can separate. So up until this point, she's saying, why are we being couch potatoes? We're just watching this whole thing unfold. And sin basically says, I feel new strength, a new energy, because sin entered creation. Now, death is still weak, because death has not entered yet. So she's basically saying Satan must have succeeded because he hasn't been chased back down here by the enemy in droves, and this place couldn't contain his punishment. So he must have been successful. Thou, my shade inseparable, must with me along. So sin and death cannot separate. They have to be near each other. 252 to 263, she says, let's do something to make the trip easier and create a path between here and the new world. 264 to 271, death agrees as he smells the change in mortality on the earth. Actually, there was death because they sacrificed an animal. So death is starting to drool here. Death sniffs the change again, picturing all the different places and ways death could happen on earth. 272 to 297. He's kind of imagining armies lying camped, come flying, Lord was sent to living carcasses designed for death. The following day in bloody fight, the scented, the grim feature, and he's basically imagining, ooh, there are so many ways to die. 298 to 305. As with asphaltic slime, broad as the gate, deep to the roots of hell, the gathered beach they fastened, and the mole immense wrought on over the foaming deep, high-arched, a bridge of length prodigious, joining to the wall immovable of this now fenceless world, forfeit to death, from hence a passage broad, smooth, easy, inoffensive, down to hell. So there is a road to hell. So they basically get all this asphalty slime stuff and they make this bridge that's as wide as the gate to hell, and they bring it up to the wall of earth. Where the wall is, I'm not sure, but 306 to 331. Milton compares the bridge to hell with other construction projects undertaken by man with proportional comparisons. They build the bridge all the way to earth, get to paradise, and even though Satan is disguised as a bright angel, they recognize him. 332 to 351. He, after Eve seduced, unminded, slunk into the wood fast by, and changing shape to observe the sequel, saw his guileful act by Eve, though all unweeting, seconded upon her husband, saw their shame that sought vain covertures. But when he saw descend the Son of God to judge them, terrified he fled, not hoping to escape, but shunned the present, fearing, guilty, that what his wrath might suddenly inflict. That past returned by night, and listening where the hapless pair sat in their sad discourse and various plaint, thence gathered his own doom, which understood not instant, but of future time, with joy and tidings fraught. To hell he now returned. And at the brink of chaos, near the foot of his new wondrous pontifice, unhoped met, who to meet him came, his offspring dear. Great joy was at their meeting, and at sight of that stupendous bridge, his joy increased. It's got a warped sense of joy, but whatever. So after, basically he's saying, after he seduces Eve, he kind of slithers into the woods and he stops to watch and sees Eve give the fruit to Adam, sees them shameful, try to cover themselves up. And then he hears the Son of God and he goes, oh, shoot. And that's when he slinks away and tries to escape. Not very far, because he knows what's coming, but just far enough where he's not going to get immediate judgment. And then as Satan returns to hell, he goes, hey, a road. And then he sees sin and death, his children there, and they go, yay. And they greet each other with joy, which is kind of weird because they were about to kill each other earlier. So he returns to hell and he's excited as all get out about this bridge. Now it's easy. Long he admiring stood, till sin, his fair enchanting daughter, thus the silence broke. So he stood there admiring the bridge as sin speaks. She explains that she felt his success and built the bridge to make the journey easier. Any questions so far, comments, interjections? No? Okay. 383 to 409. Satan praises his children for their accomplishment and tells them that much of the success of his plan rests on them and commissions them to go to earth. So he goes, okay, I've done my part. Now sin and death, get up there and do your job. 410 to 459, Satan dismisses them and they quickly leave to carry out his work as Satan passes through the open gates into hell. Many have already left for earth, many demons have already left for earth, while the rest gathered around the city of hell, Pandemonium. He is greeted like a conquering general as he makes his way to the high throne of hell. In 460 to 503, Satan speaks to his comrades and tells them that his mission was successful beyond hope and about the wide road paved by sin and death. He then tells them how it happened, and all they have to do is go to earth in full happiness. So they basically, it seems, have successfully executed both of their goals. To frustrate God, not really, and to cause man to fall, and they have a new place to live, a better neighborhood. So having said, a while he stood, expecting their universal shout and high applause to fill his ear. When contrary, he hears on all sides from innumerable tongues a dismal universal hiss, the sound of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more. His visage drawn, he felt to sharp and spare. His arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone, reluctant, but in vain. A greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned, according to his doom. So while Satan is expecting all the demons to go, yay, they all go, because they all turned into snakes. And as he stands there wondering, what is going on? He turns into a snake. Satan tries to speak, but hissed with a forked tongue, as was every demon with him, dropping shields and spears to the ground because they had no hands. (547b to 584). God makes a grove spring up near Pandemonium with one tall tree in the middle, like the forbidden tree. The demons were plagued with an unquenchable thirst and slithered to the grove to eat the fruit. Instead of sweet fruit, it was bitter ash inside. Aha! Here's where the serpents have to eat the dirt. Their original shapes return to them. This occurs annually as a reminder. Annually. In a timeless.
That they're snakes all the time, but then every once in a while they turn back into demons to be reminded.
No, they turn into snakes to be reminded, and then
Okay.
it's interesting.
Is that based on like some sort of weird holiday that we just don't celebrate anymore?
The Fall of Man holiday? I mean,
No, like the snakes, them turning into snakes once a year.
Oh.
Is that like,
that sounds like something from some pagan, like
yeah.
ancient mythology. Might have to look that up. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. 585 to 590. Sin and death arrive in paradise, now in bodily form. Death does not have his pale horse yet. Sin speaks. So, Death, what do you think of paradise? Death answers, since he's always hungry, paradise and hell are no different because he doesn't have enough death. So he's hungry. Hell and paradise are no different to him. Sin tells death to feed on the plants and flowers first, and then the animals until it's man's time. 606 to 609, death says that the scythe of time will mow down everything else until man infects everything, and then he'll be the sweetest prey. Woof. 610 to 615, sin and death go their own ways, both to destroy. God watches them. God speaks. 616 to 640. This is great. They come here in triumph, not realizing that I called them here to clean up the mess made in his disobedience. God gives a brief explanation of the plan of salvation. So while sin and death think we have free reign, no, you're here to do God's will to clean up after man's mess. (641 to 719). God sets everything in motion to prepare the earth for man's habitation, including weather, seasons, and the circle of life. It doesn't literally say the circle of life in here, but that's the gist. And throw a little Lion King in there. 720 to 742. This is what I call Adam's lament. He groans over what he had and what he lost. This sounds awfully familiar. Who else groaned about what he had and what he lost? Satan. And what he gained in return, death. He complains that all who come after him will hate him for his choice. So Adam's thinking about the future. 743 to 768, Adam complains that he didn't ask to be made. He says that given his punishment, God should have reduced him to dust since he couldn't do what God asked him to do. It's a general woe is me passage.
I made a statement that Adam now worries about the future. It makes me wonder if that was punishment not necessarily stated.
Maybe not an intended punishment, but
Yeah.
could be. I mean, Adam,
Eating of the fruit has you now worry about the future.
yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. It's a side benefit.
Interesting.
771 to 793, Adam continues his lament, feeling sorry for his choices and his fate. He mentions wanting to lay down in his mother's lap. What? Which can only mean lie in the dirt. So he was brought from the dirt. His mother's lap is to lie in the dirt. Mother Earth, okay, that's Adam, 794 to 831, Adam continues. He's got this long lament. Considering God's options, realizing he has none that would contradict what he is and what he said, other than the solution God already established. So he's saying, okay, when I think about what God's options were, this is probably the best one. I thought somebody said something. 831 to 844. First and last on me only, as the source and spring of all corruption, all the blame lights do. So might the wrath, fond wish. Couldst thou support that burden heavier than the earth to bear, than all the world much heavier, thou divided with that bad woman? Thus what thou desirest and what thou fearest alike destroys all hope of refuge, and concludes thee miserable beyond all past example and future. To Satan only like both crime and doom, O conscience, into what abyss of fears and horrors hast thou driven me, out of which I find no way, from deep to deeper plunged. Adam is basically saying, it all falls on me. It was my responsibility. He's actually accepting responsibility here. Wow. And so I might be due all the wrath. Oh, how I wish. He says, could you take all this on a heavier burden than the earth, than all the world, which is much heavier, though divided with that woman? That woman? Really? So what you desire, what you fear, destroys all hope of safety. The only conclusion I have is that I am the most miserable example of man beyond any past and future men. Wait a minute. Past men? Milton's got his timeline a little mixed up here. Only Satan likes the crime and my doom. O conscience, into what depths of fear and horror have you driven me, out of which I see no way out, but I'm plunged deeper and deeper into despair. 845 to 862, Adam's lament lasts through the darkest night ever. Adam wonders where death is. Whom thus afflicted when sad Eve beheld, desolate where she sat, approaching nigh, soft words to his fierce passion she essayed. But her with stern regard he thus repelled. Out of my sight, thou serpent! That name best befits thee with him leagued, thyself as false and hateful. Nothing wants but that thy shape like this and color serpentine may show thy inward fraud, to warn all creatures from thee henceforth, lest that too heavenly form pretended to hellish falsehood snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, and had not thy pride and wandering vanity, when least was safe, reject my forewarning, and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself, him overweening to overreach, but with the serpent meeting, fooled and beguiled. By him vow, I by thee, to trust thee from my side. Imagined wise, constant, mature, proof against all assaults. And understood not all was but a show, rather than solid virtue. All but a rib, crooked by nature, bent as now appears, more to the part sinister from me drawn. Wow, that is harsh. I don't really need to translate that, I don't think. But gosh, I mean, the son should have gone, now hold on. You know, first he's up above, he's saying, yeah, this is all my fault. Oh yeah, there's her. So he's speaking really harshly to Eve. 887 to 908, Adam continues and calls her a defect from nature and doubts she ever loved him and blames her for his situation. Whew. Wow. I think this ends almost at the end of it. Okay. I'm just going to read the translation because, so Adam stops talking and turns away from Eve. Eve stays nearby and cries endlessly. Her hair is a mess, and she fell humbly at his feet and hugged his knees, seeking his peace, and started with her argument. She says, "Don't forsake me, Adam. Let heaven witness my sincere love, and I have only reverence in my heart for you. Unwillingly and unhappily I have deceived you. I beg for your forgiveness and hug your knees. Don't make me sad, for I live for you, your gentle looks, your help, your counsel in this worst moment. You are my strength and reliable partner. Without you, where can I go? Where can I live? Where we live, let us be in peace for an hour or two. Let us join as we are joined with common fate, one hatred against a foe who expressly set out to doom us, that cruel serpent. Don't hate me for the punishment that's come upon us. I already hate myself more than you could. We both sinned, but you sinned against God alone, but I sinned against you and God. I will return to the place where we were judged, and I will cry and harass heaven. I will ask that the entire sentence removed from my head may fall on me, the sole cause of all this sadness. Me and me only should be the object of his anger." She stopped weeping, and she could not be moved from her position at his knees until Adam, calming down, realized his mistake, and he felt bad for her. His heart relented toward her, his life until lately, his sole delight, now at his feet, submissive and in distress. This beautiful creature seeking to reconcile, seeking his advice, his help from the one she had displeased. Disarmed, all his anger gone, he spoke to her tenderly and lifted her spirits. 947 and 965, Adam says he didn't know that she felt that way, and he was sorry for that his harsh words caused her to cry. He suggests that they stay together. He's sorry that they have a slow death coming, and that will also fall on all of their descendants. 966 to 988, Eve understands how she has little credibility with Adam and is pleased that they are reconciled. She says she'll always tell him what is on her heart. She then expresses concern for their children, that they will come into a world where death lives. She suggests that they remain childless to prevent such sadness, to prevent so much sadness. To prevent such sadness, oh, I guess I repeated my phrase here. To prevent such sadness, period. So. Good grief. Oh, that's the next book. Okay. Like, how much more is there? Childless thou art, childless remain, so death shall be deceived his glut. And with us too be forced to satisfy his ravenous maw. So he's saying, you're childless now, we should remain childless, so death will be denied his fill. With just us two to satisfy his ravenous hunger. But if you think it will be difficult and hard to talk to look to love, to abstain from love's benefits, sweet marital embraces, to desire without hope of satisfaction before me, languishing. So he's saying, I can't restrain myself. He thinks things are going to happen. So he says, let us seek death. Or if we can't find him, we should create death with our own hands. Why live any longer, shivering in fear with no end to it but death? We have the power with many quick methods to choose from, my destruction with your destruction to destroy us. Actually, that was Eve talking. She stops talking, turning pale, but Adam is not convinced, and he responds to Eve. She says, your contempt for life and pleasure seems to convince you that this idea of yours is beautiful and excellent, but my mind has contempt for it. Self-destruction is so contrary to your nature. It suggests not a contempt for life, but anguish in regard for love lost, and frankly, loss of too much pleasure. If you want to die as a way to end your misery and avoid God's punishment, you should know that God has thought through the execution of his wrath to be thwarted in any way. I'm more afraid that death will not protect us from the pain we are doomed to pay. Rather, such acts of refusal will provoke God to make his death in us live. Then let us seek a safer option, which I can see, remembering that part of our punishment, that your seed will bruise the serpent's head. Small amends, unless he means, which I believe, our biggest enemy, Satan. This will be lost if we kill ourselves or if we decide not to have any children, as you suggested. So our foe will escape the punishment as spoken, and we instead will double our punishment on our own heads. Don't speak any more about suicide or choosing not to have kids, as that cuts us off from hope. It suggests only bitterness and pride, impatience and spite, reluctance that God will do what he says and that his just punishment will be on us. Adam reminds Eve of what God said regarding their individual punishment. Adam suggests that they pray to God and be open with him and ask him to teach them what he wants them to do. Ooh.
So we already see here that their fellowship with God is broken.
Mhm.
So they're having this conversation between the two of them. Without the interruption or the intervention of God because of that broken fellowship. That's what I'm getting at.
Well, first, their fellowship is broken.
Correct.
Adam and Eve's fellowship is broken because Adam is harsh, the harshest I've ever conceived. I mean, I could not have conceived of that. I mean, it's just awful. And then she submits herself to him as she should have before the fall, and he forgives her. And then they start this discussion about maybe we shouldn't have kids, maybe we should kill ourselves. And Adam's like, no, hold on. God said a child will crush the serpent's head. So if we don't have kids or we kill ourselves, that won't happen. And that would end our hope. So Adam's got a little bit of wisdom here. 1081 to 1096. I'm going to jump through this because, well, that's the end of the book. Adam says that God will instruct them how to pray, ask him for grace so we don't need to be afraid about living life. He says there's nothing better to do than to go to the place where he passed judgment on us, fall on our faces to the ground reverently, confess our sins and our faults humbly, and beg for forgiveness. Beg with our tears watering the ground, and with our sighs sent with humble hearts in honest sorrow and meek humiliation. So he's rightly saying this is how we approach God. Humbly, contrite with contrition, and ask for forgiveness. 1097 at 1104, so Adam spoke sorrowfully, and Eve felt as remorseful. They went right away to the place where judgment was passed and fell on their faces before God reverently. Both humbly confessed their faults and begged for God's forgiveness with their tears watering the ground, their sighs often rising to the air, sent from humble hearts, and a sign of honest sorrow and meek humiliation. Well, that's a good sign.
But that conversation between Jesus and God had already taken place.
Mhm.
But they weren't aware that conversation took place.
Well, they know about the condemnation on the serpent or on Satan.
Right,
And that was Adam's hope.
right,
Adam's like, wait, we aren't the only ones that receive judgment. Satan received judgment, and the only way to defeat him is for us to have children.
right. So okay, I get it. I'm just I'm waiting for him to interject more, because they're going directly to God. So there's nothing about, I mean, there's that tweak that they remember that, okay, he said that he was gonna crush the serpent's head.
Mhm.
But the whole thing about Jesus, I'm waiting for him to see how he's gonna infuse that. The intercessor.
Yeah, it becomes clearer to Adam
Yeah,
in 11. I may have gotten my books mixed up when I sent out the email. It's 11 and part of 12 where Adam is told the story of the Bible. And it's funny because in several parts in book 11 where where he's being told the story of the Bible, where it's like, okay, then everybody got together and they worked together, and Adam's like, oh, good. Then they built this big tower. Oh no. I mean, he's encouraged, deflated, encouraged, deflated, encouraged, deflated as the story progresses, and it's somewhat humorous for Adam to go, this is my future? You got to be kidding. And then he gets to Christ, and we'll get to that. So in lines 1 to 20, Adam and Eve prayed, God softened their hearts and renewed their faith, and God heard their prayers. Then the glad son presenting thus to intercede began. See, Father, what first fruits on earth are sprung from thy implanted grace in man. These sighs and prayers, which in this golden censer mixed with incense, I, thy priest, before thee bring. Fruits of more pleasing savor from thy seed sown with contrition in his heart than those which his own hand manuring all the trees of paradise could have produced, ere fallen from innocence. So the son is saying to the father, I am the intercessor. Here are their prayers. I'm going to mix them with incense and present them to you. That's a beautiful picture.
it sure is.
Although his own hand manuring all the trees of paradise could have.
Well, yeah.
It's poetic. It's poetry. It's okay. Yeah. He could have used other words that, yeah, he says, now therefore bend thine ear to supplication, hear his sighs, though mute. Unskillful with what words to pray, let me interpret for him. Didn't Tommy say something about
Words right out of my mouth, yeah, that's right. That
the
goes
Holy
like this.
Spirit does that for us?
Yes, that's just.
But the son is saying, I take his inept words and translate them to something that is pleasing to the ear. See, I do listen in church. He says, accept me, and in me from these receive the smell of peace toward mankind. Let him live before thee reconciled, at least his days numbered, though sad. Till death his doom, which I to mitigate thus plead, not to reverse, to better life shall yield him, where with me all my redeemed may dwell in joy and bliss, made one with me as I with thee am one. So here the son is saying, he's going to live. Let him live peacefully. Let him live reconciled, even though his days are numbered, and that's kind of sad. But he will live with me. To better life shall yield him, where with me all my redeemed may dwell. So basically, the son is saying, everyone who believes in me will be redeemed and live with me. So here we're getting deep into theology right here. The Father answered serenely, accepting the Son's offer, but he says that mankind must leave paradise, and death is in his future until the second life, acquired with faith and works done in faith. He has to tell the angels what the plan is. So the angels don't inherently know what the plan is. He has to tell them. That's 45 to 70. 71, I like this. The Son blows a trumpet, and all the angels gather. I'm imagining it's a shofar. Although maybe in heaven it sounds more like a trumpet. 84 to 98, the Father tells everyone that man has repented, and they must leave paradise or they might get to the tree of life. 99 to 125, God tells Michael to gather armed cherubim to protect man in case Satan tries something else. He tells Michael to escort Adam and Eve from the garden, and flaming cherubim must guard the tree of life. 126 to 140, the Father stops talking and Michael prepared to leave. Adam and Eve finish praying. So all this, they're praying all this time, and this is what happens in heaven while they're praying. Adam and Eve finish praying and feel strengthened by heaven with new hope. Adam speaks. Adam says that all the good they feel and have received comes from heaven. 148 to 161. For since I sought by prayer the offended deity to appease, kneeled, and before him humbled all my heart, methought I saw him placable and mild, bending his ear. Persuasion in me grew that I was heard with favor. Peace returned home to my breast, and to my memory his promise, that thy seed shall bruise our foe, which then not minded in dismay, yet now assures me that the bitterness of death is past, and we shall live. Whence hail to thee, Eve, rightly called mother of all mankind, mother of all things living, since by thee man is to live, and all things live for man. So, he says, since I prayed to God, I appeased to him, I knelt to him, I humbled myself before him with all my heart. I thought I saw him. I thought I felt peace. He basically goes into this small description of how he was relieved just by his prayer and God's peace returning to him, which, again, I mean, this is another beautiful aspect of prayer. 161 to 181, Eve says she isn't worthy to bear the titles Adam gives her. Mother of all mankind, mother of all living things. She's like, I'm not worthy for that title. Well, it's not whether you're worthy or not, it's just a fact. She recounts her sins, but she's grateful to be the source of life. She then says that they have work to do. Eve said all of this humbly, but fate is funny and had other plans. Nature first gave signs impressed on bird, beast, air. Air suddenly eclipsed after short blush of morn. Nigh in her sight, the bird of Jove stooped from his airy tour. Two birds of gayest plume before him drove. Down from a hill, the beast that reigns in woods, first hunter then, pursued a gentle brace, goodliest of all the forest, hart and hind. Direct to the eastern gate was bent their flight. Adam observed, and with his eye the chase pursuing, not unmoved, to the Eve thus spake, what's going on? Okay. The bird of Jove is an eagle. And the others are just game birds, I guess. Two birds, doves, I guess, with bright colors. So never before has Adam seen a hunt. He looks in the sky and he sees an eagle swooping down on two birds. Okay. Then down from a hill, First hunter. Who would you think the first hunter is in the animal kingdom? A lion. Exactly. A lion is chasing a gentle brace. It took me a while to figure out what a brace was. It's a deer. And it was the best in all the forest. And they were running towards the gate, the eastern gate of paradise. So there's a hunt going on, and the lion's chasing the deer out of paradise. Interesting. 193 to 207, Adam tells Eve that more changes are coming based on the behavior of nature. You think? 208 to 225, Adam wasn't wrong. A bolt of lightning struck a hill, and Michael emerges from the lightning and approaches Eve. 226 to 250, Michael speaks to Eve. He tells her not to be afraid and that he must meet with Adam. Michael takes the shape of a man dressed like a military commander, and he finds Adam. Adam, heaven's high behest no preface needs, sufficient that thy prayers are heard, and death then due by sentence when thou didst transgress, defeated of his seizure many days, given thee of grace, wherein thou mayest repent, and one bad act with many deeds well done mayest cover. Well may then thy Lord appeased, redeem thee quite from death's rapacious claim. But longer in this paradise to dwell permits not. To remove thee I am come, and send thee from the garden forth to till the ground whence thou wast taken, fitter soil. So Michael's saying, heaven's high command, basically, your prayers have been heard, but you can't stay here. He says, when you repent, you can cover one sin with many good deeds. I'm not really sure that's how it works. It's like perhaps the deed is confession and repentance. Is he talking about works? Or is he talking about maybe after you repent, you do works to honor God? That's open for discussion. I mean, it's Michael then says, I have come to remove you and send you from the garden to work the ground from where you were taken, more appropriate soil. Probably clay. Michael stops. Adam is dumbstruck, chilled, and greatly saddened by the news that they have to leave paradise. Eve, who unseen yet all had heard, with audible lament, discovered soon the place of her retire. Oh, unexpected stroke, worse than of death. Must I thus leave thee paradise, thus leave thee native soil, these happy walks and shades, fit haunt of gods, where I had hoped to spend, quiet though sad, the respite of that day that must be mortal to us both. Oh, flowers that never will in other climate grow, my early visitation and my last at even, which I bred up with tender hand from the first opening bud and gave ye names, who now shall rear ye to the sun, or rank your tribes, and water from the ambrosial fount. Thee lastly, nuptial bower, by me adorned with what to sight or smell was sweet. From thee how shall I part, and whither wander down into a lower world? To this obscure and wild, how shall we breathe in other air, less pure, accustomed to immortal fruits? What's she doing? Yeah. She's going, goodbye, flowers. Goodbye, bower. Good. I picture Steve Martin in The Jerk. You know, it's if you haven't seen that movie, the great Christian film, The Jerk, no, it's not. As Tommy would say, it's not a. Yeah, it's funny though. But anyway, but Eve is unseen. She overhears the news. She goes, oh, and then she goes through her lament. Whom thus the angel interrupted mild. Lament not, Eve, but patiently resign what justly thou hast lost. Nor set thy heart, thus overfond, on that which is not thine. Thy going is not lonely, with thee goes thy husband, Whom to follow thou art bound. Where he abides, think there thy native soil. So he says, hey, this ain't yours. So move on. But he interrupts her mildly. He doesn't like cut her off. He just, hold on. He says, you're not going alone. You're taking your husband. Small consolation? I don't know. Whom to follow thou art bound. You have to go. Where he lives, that's your native soil. 293 to 295, Adam's shock subsides, and he humbly speaks with Michael. Adam thanks Michael for breaking the news gently. He says that the rest of the world is inhospitable and wonders how two people so frail can survive. He regrets that he won't be able to show his children where he grew up. Wait a minute, he didn't grow. Whatever. He says that regardless of where he lives, he will give glory to God. Okay. 334 to 356, Michael speaks kindly to Adam, telling him that God is everywhere. And paradise was supposed to be his seat of authority, but he lost that. 356 to 369, Michael says that he's been sent to show Adam what the future holds. He tells Adam to follow him and then makes Eve sleep. So he sleeps, and she falls, or I guess she lies down in a soft bed of flowers, and she falls asleep. Her last nap in paradise. Adam agrees to follow. Michael's purpose was to show Adam all of Earth's kingdoms and glory. Michael removes the film from Adam's eyes, giving him a clear vision of what is on display. So he takes Adam to a high mountaintop and says, look, and Adam's eyes are opened. Open to what, you say? 423 to 428. Adam, now ope thine eyes, and first behold the effects which thy original crime hath wrought in some to spring from thee, who never touched the accepted tree, nor with the snake conspired, nor sinned thy sin, yet from that sin derived corruption to bring forth more violent deeds. Michael shows Adam how Cain killed Abel. Adam witnesses the first murder. Imagine Adam's shock. 450 to 460, Michael tells Adam that these are his sons and the reason Cain killed Abel. Adam is shocked. So first of all, he didn't know they were his sons. And then Michael says, by the way, they're your kids. And Adam is shocked seeing death for the first time. Michael says that death comes in many ways, and he lists some causes of death. He says, by violent stroke, fire, flood, famine, intemperance, more in meats and drinks. So if you eat or drink too much, on which the earth shall bring diseases dire, of which a monstrous crew before thee shall appear, and thou mayest know what misery the inabstinence of Eve shall bring on men. Okay, so he's blaming Eve now for that. But so he basically lists all these awful ways: ghastly spasm, racking torture, qualms of heart-sick agony, feverish kinds, convulsions, epilepsies, fears. You get the idea. Just this list of stuff, and this isn't even the modern stuff. This is that, ancient stuff. And Adam weeps. 500 to 514. O miserable mankind, to what fall degraded, to what wretched state reserved. Oy. Adam cries for the future, saying it will be better to end here and not have children. Oh, we're back to that again. Adam asks why man, having the same divine traits, can't be free of his fate. Michael says it all stems from Eve's initial sin. 526 to 529, Adam says it is justice, but asks if there's no other way besides these painful means of death. I guess he didn't mention old age. 530 to 546, Michael says there is another way by living with temperance. I think this is Milton's comment to his English brethren. living by temperance, not engaging in too much food or drink, eat healthy, outlive youth. Interesting. Good advice in any age, I suppose. Adam speaks, 547 to 552. He says he won't run from death or seek to prolong his life much. Michael replies. He says that Adam shouldn't love or hate his life, but to live his life well. 556 to 598. So he starts to, he tells Adam to look out, and Adam sees a spacious plain where there are tents of various colors. Some men were forging metal, while others were worshiping God. There was love and singing. 599 to 603, Adam says, hey, this looks pretty good. 604 to 627, Michael warns Adam not to judge things by what he sees. Inside the tents, all sorts of sins were being committed. That the people are doing evil things, making idols. They brought forth women who were beautiful but wicked, tempting the men of God. He tells of the marriage of men with angels, which creates the giants. And again, Adam goes, oi! Adam says it's a shame that man's woe is brought upon by women. That same song and dance. Okay. 634 to 682, Michael says it's because that men aren't assuming their God-ordained role in their families. Michael shows another scene where the aftermath of a battle is seen. Michael talked of Enoch, Genesis 5, who was a man of God and spoke of God, and God took Enoch. He took Enoch. Enoch didn't die. He just sweeps him up. Violence and oppression rules. Adam weeps over the violence and the pain. 683 to 711, Michael says that these events are the product of bad marriages. In these days, only strength was admired. Michael tells Adam about his seventh generation, who is seen as righteous in a perverse world. Who's the seventh generation? Noah. 712 to 762, Adam looked and things were different. Wars were over and things went south the other way, with fun, parties, gaming, prostitution. And this man preached conversion and repentance, all in vain. He tells about Noah's task given by God and the ensuing flood. Adam speaks, "O visions ill foreseen, better had I lived ignorant of future, so had borne my part of evil only, each day's lot enough to bear. Those now that were dispensed the burden of many ages on me light at once, by my foreknowledge gaining birth abortive, to torment me ere their being, with thought that they must be. Let no man seek henceforth to be foretold what shall befall him or his children. Evil he may be sure, which neither his foreknowing can prevent. And he the future evil shall no less in apprehension than in substance feel, grievous to bear. But that care now is past. Man is not whom to warn. Those few escaped famine and anguish will at last consume, wandering that watery desert. I had hoped when violence was ceased and war on earth, all would have then gone well. Peace would have crowned with length of happy days the race of man. But I was far deceived, for now I see peace to corrupt no less than war to waste. How comes it thus? Unfold, celestial guide, and whether here the race of man will end." So Adam sees all this stuff that's going on, and he goes, "Oh, tell me this is the worst it'll get." 787 to 839, Michael explains to Adam the cycle of war and peace. He says the last people he saw had wealth and did great things in the eyes of man, but were empty of virtue. But God saw one good man, and he and the animals were safe on the ark as the rain fell and the waters covered the earth. He said paradise will be moved by the flood and be deposited on an island. So the flood actually moves paradise. This is that whole floating island theory. 840 to 869, Adam looked and saw the ark on the water. The rain stops and the clouds rolled back. The waters recede. The ark sits on dry land. A raven, then a dove is sent. The dove returns with an olive leaf, the sign of peace. Then a rainbow signaling the peace of God appears. O thou who future things canst represent as present heavenly instructor, Adam speaking, I revive at this last sight, assured that man shall live with all the creatures and their seed preserved. Far less I now lament for one whole world of wicked sons destroyed, than I rejoice for one man found so perfect and so just that God vouchsafes to raise another world from him and all his anger to forget. But say, what mean those colored streaks in heaven distended as the brow of God appeased? Or serve they as a flowery verge to bind the fluid skirts of that same watery cloud, lest it again dissolve and shower the earth? So he says he's encouraged by this latest vision, and that man will live with all the creatures and their seed preserved. He says, I'm not really that sad about the wicked world that was destroyed, but I'm happy that one man was preserved and the world will be populated by him now. So all is going to be great now, right? Then he says, what are those colored streaks in the sky? He doesn't never seen a rainbow before. He says, what is that? He says, does it mean that God's appeased, or does it serve to hold up the watery clouds to keep them from dissolving again? So is it like it's just this arch to hold up the sky? I think Michael kind of chuckled at that. Oh, you simple man. 884 to 900. Michael compliments Adam on his interpretation of the events. God has refrained from his anger. It made him sad to see so much violence. He was happy that one man could be spared so not to blot out mankind. The rainbow is to show that God will not destroy the earth by rain again. The seasons will go on until the fire purges heaven and earth and all things are made new. And that's the end of book 11. So, book 11 ends with Noah. The preservation of mankind. And like I said before, Adam goes, oh, this is good. Oh, this is good. Oh. Well, he will be disappointed in book 12. But what do you think of Milton's presentation of biblical stories? He's pretty solid on that. I mean, you can't mess it up. I mean, it's narrative.
That's so interesting. I would have never, the fact that he thought of all of this, I would have never, the whole story of the fall, he's expanded it so much.
Mhm.
So much. That is just thoughts I've never even conceived of.
Yeah. So yeah, his extrapolation of Genesis 3 is to 12 books is just amazing. But what benefit do you think Adam gets out of knowing the biblical story? Hope. Yeah. He's basically saying, Adam, this is your family. And Adam sees the good, the bad, and the ugly. But through it all, Michael basically says, hold on. There's more. Don't panic. Everything will be all right in the end. And he continues on in book 12, and then book 12 ends with their expulsion from paradise. So everything's going to be great. Now get out. So that's 10 and 11.
One thing that is in Genesis that it hasn't been covered in the narrative, sort of, is after the fall in Genesis, then Adam names Eve and names himself. up until that point, they're just the man and the
Nameless.
woman.
Huh.
And like, I've always thought that that's a really beautiful, like illustration of like them being kind of reunified post all of the chaos of the. It's interesting that that isn't included in this narrative. He just like from the get-go is like they're Adam and Eve.
Right.
Maybe it was just to keep things easier, like narratively, but that's like, I feel like he hit almost word for word everything in Genesis, like almost 1, 2, and 3, except for that one part.
Yeah. And I think like you said, the reason it calls them Adam and Eve from the beginning is so that you don't confuse the reader. There are some things that you have to do in literature when you keep your audience in mind.
There's another thing you left out unless you just didn't read it. I didn't read that chapter, but, where God kills an animal, give them the skins.
Oh,
Cover their
Jesus.
names.
Jesus did that, we did read that part.
There wasn't
Yeah.
there?
And the son,
He washed them.
yes, he washed the feet, then killed an animal to give them clothes.
Okay.
That was early on.
Right.
Any other comments, questions?
I'm wrestling with the conversation that Adam and Eve had about suicide and their understanding of death. I'm trying to just figure that one out. You know, I think prior to eating the fruit, they had no concept of death nor sin.
Mhm.
And then that act of disobedience then introduces them to love those concepts.
So the tree is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I guess sin and death would be covered under the evil part. So I would imagine that they have a vague understanding of death.
I think it's, I mean, I'm probably arguing more with Milton than scriptures.
Yeah.
Because I think Milton, it seems as though sin and death are living or existing out of paradise. Well, the fall has taken place. And this conversation about, oh, maybe we should kill ourselves. And it's like, death is down here. How do you know about death? You take your own. So I'm thinking Milton got carried away with things.
Watched the animal die.
Well, that was their discussion about not having kids or committing suicide before. Well, they did see the animal die that was sacrificed for their clothing. So I guess they could understand death from that. It's a bloody, messy affair. But the whole idea of killing themselves to keep future generations from experiencing this is kind of a weird one.
I mean, it's understandable. I mean, it's like they're saying we're totally miserable and we're, you know, and why would we wish this on anybody after us?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in that twisted sense, they're trying to be nice, but the other thing I was trying to figure out is, again, for this biblical, but be fruitful, go forth, and multiply, have dominion over it. That's when they said, well, maybe we shouldn't have kids. I was like, isn't that an act of disobedience as well?
That's true. By being told to go forth and multiply, and then they say, let's not have kids. Yeah, that is definitely an act of disobedience. And they're supposed to rule over the earth. So, you know, there's a whole lot of things they're supposed to do. There are a whole lot of things they were supposed to do.
But you know, to add to that, this whole dialogue between Adam and Eve is just riddled with the element of knowing that they took the fruit, they've eaten the fruit. So now they're left unto their own knowledge, their own sense of rationality. They're utilizing an entity, for lack of a better word, intellect, if you will. Something that they were not created or even God did not plan that for them. But in using that element, it's like the Pandora's box. All of this is opening. Let's kill ourselves. Let's do this. Let's do that. So we just see sin just running rampant, these sinful thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, and the Bible says, take every thought captive, but they're clearly not doing that. They are just,
Well, it's not a stretch when you consider the way Adam spoke to Eve, how harsh, full of vitriol, and I mean, it was just awful. I mean, I read that 3 times, and every time I was going, "Oh my gosh." I mean, that's just the worst thing. I mean, to call her a defect of nature, I mean, gosh.
Yeah,
And this is the woman you were so enamored with before.
Dude, it's the first time sin came into his thoughts, so he didn't know how to handle it. He had no
yeah.
filter.
Yeah, for some reason, the idea of Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Everybody know that story? Yeah. Data gets the emotion chip, and he's totally overwhelmed. I think that's the idea.
Right.
For anybody who's listening. Yeah, sin enters their lives, and then all of a sudden, all these feelings and things that they've never experienced before, and it just comes flooding out of his mouth.
I think it echoes this perpetual disconnect from God when you think about it. It's like, we're not gonna have kids when we were told to. We're gonna take our own lives, even though we're creations of God. Eve is this despicable thing of nature, not a creation of God. So every time those statements are made, God is never in the concept or conceived.
Right.
in that thought.
Yeah, they don't even consider God when they're speaking,
Right.
and that's sin.
It's
I
just
mean,
them. So, we're in charge of ourselves, we're in charge of each other, we're in charge of, and it's like, they become more and more disconnected with God.
yeah.
Right. And that plays over into today, there's a small element that I see of questioning their identity. And even today.
Yeah.
The unbeliever questioning, okay, how do I get along? Who am I? This and that. Much of the same, if not identical, but the similar dialogue. We still have it today.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you consider people today without God, how angry a lot of them are, how desperate they are. I mean,
Seeking.
yeah.
Right, as soon as they're having this really dark, depressing conversation about their options, and as soon as they remember, we have a purpose, and it's to love each other, and they start to feel a little better about it.
Yeah.
So it further shows how dark it can get when you don't have that kind of purpose and that light to go toward. So I think it's good that it shows that contrast.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the dichotomy of thinking without God and then having the right mind space to realize, wait, God is part of our lives. He is going to help us through this. We can always rely on him. We can pray to him. When Adam and Eve realize, you're right, that when they have that mindset, then, okay, it's going to be rough. I mean, Adam goes, we're frail. How are we going to live out there? It's an inhospitable place. Well, maybe you should have thought of that before. So, yeah.
A bit of a Bible theory question here. So there's 2 mentions of the creation of mankind in Genesis, 1:27 and 2:7. And then I was surprised to see in book 10, line 840, where he references man past and present, past and future, sorry. And you even caught a comment on that. So I guess my question is, did Milton or that day and age when this was written, did they support the concept that there was a past version of man that was in existence before Adam and Eve?
Which book was that?
Book 10, 840?
Past man, when Adam says past.
I have a theory, but I'm just curious what if Milton had, or if there was a school of thought back then that supported the concept of mankind being created twice.
beyond all past, example, and future. Thus what thou desirest and what thou fearest alike destroys all hope of refuge and concludes thee miserable beyond all past, example, and future.
So Genesis 1:27 says, so God created mankind in his own image, in the image of God he created them, male and female. And then Genesis 2:7 goes into how he created Adam and Eve and from the dirt
Mhm.
and breathed life into them.
Right.
So
I don't know that this suggests Milton believes in a double creation, or, I mean, was man created once, then erased, and then created again? That's not what scripture says, but
Are we like definitely sure this line is specifically referring only to mankind and maybe not any kind of creature?
well, it's Adam saying first and last on me, me only is the source and spring. I'm sorry, this is Eve. Couldst thou support that burden heavier than the earth to bear? No, this is Adam. I'm sorry. It's Adam. Thus, what thou desirest and what thou fearest alike destroys all hope of refuge and concludes thee miserable beyond all past and example and future. I guess the question is, past example of what?
Well, that's why I say creature, because I guess you could say Satan was miserable or his other followers were.
That's true. That's a good idea.
I wonder if maybe that's like a mythological reference, because I know that there is in Jewish mythology, there's like another creation story where there's a different Eve and she refuses to submit to Adam, and so she's kicked out of the garden, and then God makes Eve out of Adam's rib. I mean, it's all a myth, but maybe it's like he references so many other forms of
That's true.
mythology.
There's a
Maybe
lot
it's
of.
kind of a, I don't know.
That's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. I didn't even know about that. I mean, that's.
Well, it's where I mean, I'm sure you've heard the concept of like Lilith before.
Yeah.
Like that was the original Eve in that mythological story.
We've heard that recently, haven't we?
Yeah.
Interesting idea. I hadn't considered that. It's one of those lines that it's hard to find a hard and fast interpretation of it. So every idea is valid. So, anything else? Okay, so no class next week, and we'll have book 12 for November 5th, election night. Yeah, and that's it. As always, if you have questions when you're reading, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer them. So have a good night.